Good morning. I guess we'll get started. It's about time. Good morning, everybody. I'm just happy to be anywhere. It's been a fun, entertaining week. And we have guests from high school class today, junior high class today. Welcome. I spent a lot of time this week sitting in an airport, so I've got a lot to say. I was supposed to get home in time on Wednesday to eat ice cream, and turns out I was boarding the plane about the time everybody was eating ice cream, so I didn't get to eat any ice cream. That was very... Is it? I thought about digging through the freezer yesterday when we were up here for the garage sale. And, oh, now you are truly a blessing. And just so you know, yesterday we had a little garage sale, and I think a lot of people in the community got help. So we were open like 4 hours and pulled down like $560. Because what we did is just said, pay what you can. So if they could pay $5, pay $10 for whatever they got. The important part was we had a lot of good stuff for folks to use. So zero was an option. You know, if you couldn't pay a thing, you just needed a box of clothes, guess what? That's fine. Sale price is $0. But so we had a really good turnout, and it was a blessing to some folks, and I think that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing. But it's been a fun week, and I'm glad to be here. So last week we talked about a couple of characters, the prophet Ananias and Peter. About sometimes when God tells you to do something, your answer is, surely you don't mean me, Lord. We're going to continue that theme this week. Has anybody ever met one of their heroes? I've been lucky enough to do that 2 or 3 times, and it's a mixed bag. Did they turn out like you thought they would? Because I know in one case, they did. Nolan Ryan was as gracious a human being as you can expect, and I was just awestruck. That was pretty cool. Made him got a signed baseball. There was another instance where, and I don't know, you have to be a little bit older to know this name. His name is, he goes by Patch Adams. He's a physician. Founded the Gesundheit Institute, does marvelous medical care for free. Provides free medical care for folks. I met him at a conference one time, and he was, I guess, having a bad day. He just was kind of there. And he was a little grumpy, and he was a little disappointing, but, I just knew that was just kind of the way it was. But his biggest complaint was Robin Williams played him in his movie. Well, and it makes sense. Robin Williams is like 5'9" at the most, and Patch Adams is like 6'7". Patch is very tall. And that's what bothered him most of all. Not the fact that one of the greatest comedic minds of all time played him, but just the fact he was way too short to play me. But it's still a fascinating, interesting guy. Well, and then this year at LTC, we learned about Moses. And sometimes when you dig into somebody that you've heard about all your life, like we've all heard the stories of Moses, right? That, you know what, he was human too. And it kind of pulls back the curtain on the humanity of, obviously if you did a Mount Rushmore of Bible characters, he'd be on it, I think. And so we're going to talk about him today and his dealings with God. We're going to be in Exodus, mostly chapter 3 and chapter 4 today. So... And we all know the story of Moses from his childhood. He was they were killing children, so his mama put him in a basket, put him in the river. One of Pharaoh's daughters found him, and says, I would love to have a baby. He raised her as her own. You've seen they've made Broadway musicals about it. They've made movies about it. They've even made cartoons about it, Prince of Egypt. Talking about his growing up basically in the house of Pharaoh. And then one day, he was out and one of the Hebrews was getting beat by a couple of guards, and how did he react? Anybody remember what he did? He just up and killed him. And of course that made him run because that put a price on his head, and he ran into the wilderness, and then so he lived up there for 40 years. Started a family, got, with hanging out with his father-in-law, and I guess they just started raising sheep and ranching, and he settled into a pretty good life. And then chapter 3 happens. So let's start in chapter 3. So, of course my phone went to sleep. Give me a second. There we go. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses, do not come any closer. Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, he said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out into that land, into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say, what is his name? What do I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. So we see a very clear charge from God. God, when you deal with people and you go to these, or you read articles or self-help seminars or whatever, they tell you when you trying to get a team member, a staff member, an employee, a coworker, whatever, to do something, you need to explain the why. So God just doesn't show up in a bush and go, get your stuff, you're headed to Egypt. God actually explains the why and the what and the how. He answers all the questions. So is God ambiguous on what he wants Moses to do? No. And he's like, I need you to get your stuff. And I'm going to use you to get all those people free. And what's Moses' reaction?
Not me, Lord. Not me.
You know, can't you just picture him kind of doing this? See who else is standing there? Because, and it's one of the details I didn't notice until I was reading through it last night, was it actually, and it's in verse, where was it? Verse 2. that said originally it's an angel that appears to him through the bush. And then God comes in to close the deal. Which, talk about a closer, right? That's got to be impressive. You know, an angel's would be impressive enough, and then when the boss comes in to let you know. So that you would think Moses would have understood the importance of what was just said to him. So Moses pushes back and says, why me? So Moses presents, I think, 4 objections to God right here in these verses. The first one's in verse 11, where he says, "Who am I?" It's me. I'm Moses. I'm sheep. You know, I'm not going to. I'm not impressive. I deal with sheep. And so, what do you think that? No, let's look at it from Moses' perspective. What is he projecting? He's projecting, I think, a lack of something. He's projecting a lack of something. Confidence. He didn't think he can do the job. Matter of fact, he's certain of it. Because he says, you don't mean me, because surely there's a... Yes, it does. Well, let's expand on that, because when we're called to do something, what is our first reaction? Okay, I'll tell you what my first reaction is. Yeah, it's like, there's got to be somebody better to do this than me. Yes, sir.
Moses did try, failed
Miserably.
This is the best way to do this. Kills this Egyptian.
Right.
Follow me. Now this is God's way.
And I think it's that comfort zone yanking that God does, where it's like, because I'm sure Moses thought, this is my apex. I'm going to tend sheep. I'm going to hang out in Midian with Jethro and the family, and I'll be fine. And like Ananias last week, where God said, I need you to do something that's going to make you very uncomfortable. Because remember what he had Ananias go do? He had Ananias go see Saul, who at the time was the biggest killer of Christians out there. And everybody knew it. So that was way out of Ananias' comfort zone. Well, now God's telling Moses, I'm going to not just take a squad of people out, not just take a house full or a couple of families out. They're all coming out. And you're the guy that's going to do it. And I know if I heard that, I'd certainly, my first reaction would not be, let's do this. Right? My first reaction would be, there's got to be somebody better to do this than me. So I understand the lack of confidence. Matter of fact, I kind of embrace the lack of confidence. Moses didn't know what he didn't know, right? So, like Nick said, who's evaluating the talent here? God's doing it. God is saying he knows Moses better than Moses knows Moses. Because because you're right, he had all of his experience in any kind of leadership role, especially dealing with Egypt, had not ended well. And that's why he was hanging out in the wilderness. I mean, his objection could actually sound like humility, right? He could say, it's like, no, I'm not good enough because there's somebody better than me. So that's not entirely true. I mean, we may sound like we're trying to be humble, but really we're trying to do what? Push it off on somebody else. Trying to find somebody else that can do it. It's like, can you move to plan B? Can you move down the list of names and try them out first? Come back to me if no one else can do it. And that's our nature. But God answers him, doesn't he? In verse 12. I will be with you. That should be enough, right? If the Lord God says directly to you from a bush that's on fire that's not burning up, where he's already told you, take off your shoes because right here is basically heaven on earth, holy ground, and said, you're going to go do this and I'm going to be right there next to you. So God has an answer for Moses. And he even goes into tell him who I am. So the second objection I think Moses has is his lack of knowledge of God. Doesn't it sound like he's selling God a little bit short here? I mean, and do we do that? Do we sometimes try to put God in a box?
Every day.
Every day. Because it's easier, isn't it? It's much easier to put God in a box and have him be the God with our parameters as opposed to the God with his parameters. Because his parameters are big and scary. His parameters require going into a place where there are 1,000 spears pointed at you from the moment you walk onto the floor of the palace in Egypt, right? That's a scary thing. Sometimes what God wants us to do is a scary thing. And we sell God short. Agree? Disagree? You're allowed to talk all you want. Now let's look at chapter 4, verse 1. It says, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what's that in your hand? A staff, he replied. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back to a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. So, again, Moses says, what if they don't believe me? God's already told him, I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to help you out. You're going to do this great thing. Here's who you say my name is. And he equipped him with everything he needed, right? And still Moses is doing what? He's still doubting. He's still thinking, well, what if they don't believe me? And I don't know if he's, and he was officially. It's funny how 2 weeks in a row we've talked about murderers becoming great in the story of our Lord. You can use anybody. I can safely say I'm not a murderer, not even accused. So if God can take murderers and turn them into vessels of greatness for his glory, surely he could do something with me. So again, Moses pushes back, and God, of course, has an answer. Matter of fact, God this time does show and tell. He's like, watch this, essentially. pitch that staff on the ground. And obviously it turned into a snake, and Moses, obviously it wasn't a little garter snake. It wasn't a little, rat snake. It sounds like it was a decent-sized, scary-looking snake. It had enough to make a guy that's used to the wilderness run from it. And again, he was worried about his neck. So this is his third objection.
How did God get Moses back close enough to the snake
To grab the tail.
by the tail?
Now, I will give Moses this. God said grab it by the tail, and he did.
There's more conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not just instant. Yeah, it's like snake grab done. I'm sure there's you can almost picture him like chasing him around the barn, or, insert your own scene here. But that's, unfortunately, they leave that part out. It would be fascinating. And then he shows him again. He basically gives him leprosy and then ungives him leprosy. I mean, he shows him, he does show and tell. And he goes, I'm going to be there with you, and I can do stuff. If I can do stuff like this, you worried about a bunch of guys in funny-looking hats and spears? And still. So this is his third objection. Now Moses is talking about my lack of credibility. It's like, almost telling God, do you know who I am? Do you know my story? Because right now I'm kind of a persona non grata there in Egypt, because I'm a wanted murderer. I'm a Hebrew, but I'm not, because I was raised in the house of Pharaoh. So he's not, by any stretch, a welcome man, because I don't think he's worried nobody's going to take him seriously. And God, of course, has an answer. The 3 miracles he does on him. And then, even these miracles weren't enough, were they? Let's now look in verse 10. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." Okay, so now his next objection is, I'm not a very good talker. They say, there are people that study these kind of things, that Moses might have had a speech impediment. Maybe a little bit of a stutter. And that probably, Nick and I were talking about this before class, it is kind of funny in the end, because we see how God answers, don't we? Moses says, I can't do this. I can't speak. I'm not a big orator. God says, okay. So in verse 11, the Lord says to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Now who's playing, do you know who I am? Right? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight and makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you to say. But Moses said, please send someone else. I don't want to do this. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron? Now that's me interpreting. Where it actually says, you know what? Does God get frustrated? Not in the way we get frustrated, but obviously here he gets a little frustrated, because he has proven over and over and over again that Moses is up to this task. And guess what? He's still like, somebody else can do this, right? So the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Now he's a little irritated. He goes, all right, what about your brother? I know he can talk. I know he can speak well. He's already on his way to meet you, and he'll be glad to see you. You will speak to him, and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and teach you what to do. He will speak to the people as for you, and it will be if he were your mouth and if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so that you can perform the signs with it. So God says, all right, Aaron can do the talking. You can do the show and tell. You can do the things. That's why Nick and I were talking about this. God said, all right, you can't talk. I'll give you somebody who talks. And then who talks the whole time? Aaron just stands there. The whole time when Moses gets to Egypt, all of a sudden he finds his voice.
We have to look at how Moses had to transcend
Bless you.
Egyptian, raised in an Egyptian situation. And Mama told him probably where he came from and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And, but he had those two different things to work through as he grew up. He was 40 when he ran off. That
Right.
soldier, Egyptian. And now how long has he been out in the wilderness?
40?
40.
Yeah.
And so what he's been doing out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
He spoke both worlds. He did.
Yeah, he's just sitting here in the desert. And now this happens, and God tells him to take the shoes off, the sandals off, because you're standing on holy ground.
Yeah, you're like you're standing next to God.
And now that's a whole different story, which he's thinking, he's got some thinking to do.
And it goes back to the comfort zone, because I guess what's a lot easier to do? Be a prince of Egypt or be just a sheep herder with your father-in-law and family. I mean, he probably was quite comfortable, settled into a pretty normal life. And then God said, oh, all those things you've done is nothing like what's about to happen to you. And I'm going to send you and I'm going to use you. And we've seen he pushes back. He says, argues with him and says, I can't do it. I'm not eloquent. And then God says, you'll do fine. Because I made you, right? Who made your mouth? Who makes you hear? Who makes you speak? And then again, it is funny that God said, take Aaron with you. He can do all the talking. And then Moses does all the talking. And the rest is history. A couple more verses and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Actually, let's look at chapter 6. We're going to be in verse 10. We're going to read through 13. Then the Lord said to Moses, go, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country. But Moses said to the Lord, if the Israelites will not listen to me, why would Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips? Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron about the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He commanded them to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. So again, Moses does what? God says, all right, you're equipped, you've got your helper, let's do this. And how does Moses react? I can't do it. Faltering lips. If the Israelites won't listen to me, you think Pharaoh's going to listen to me? Again, shows a lot of uncertainty, a lot of frailty, a lot of unsuredness. And mercy, doesn't that just make me feel a little bit better? Because guess what I show in things like that are presented to me? Frailty, unsuredness, a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of fear. Because God's will can be hard. It always works out well, but it's hard. And Moses is pushing away because he has a pretty good clue that it's going to be hard. I mean, I don't think I'd want to step into Pharaoh's palace and go, all those people doing that work for you, they need to go. You're going to start doing it for yourself. That's not going to go over well. I don't need to be studied in political science to know that's not going to work. That's not going to be a popular thing. And then verse 28. Now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh the king of Egypt everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me? Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. One more time, yet again. Moses says what? Can't do it. Faltering lips. He loves to play the faltering lips card. I can't talk. So finally God does what? He says, how does God say, I'm going to take care of you? He's going to make Moses like a what? Like a god. I'm going to make you a god. You think he can handle that? I'm going to tell you what to say. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to stand you there and you're basically going to talk exactly what I put in your mouth. Does anybody ever wish God would literally do that to us sometimes? Go, I'm going to use you for something great, but I'm going to do it all, and all you got to do is just stand there and do what I give you to do? Wouldn't that be cool? Because that's what he ends up having to do with Moses. Moses, again, says, I can't do it. But we know, obviously, Moses can do it, because then what does Moses go and do? He goes and does it. We know the story of the plagues. We know the story of Pharaoh's heart would harden, and then it would soften. Harden, soften, harden, soften. And, they would send for Moses, they would throw him out. Send for Moses, throw him out. He became a leader amongst the Israelites. He became feared among the Egyptians because they realized that it wasn't just Moses talking, it was God talking. So last week we talked about if you say no to God, or you say not right now to God, or you say, I really don't want to do this, Lord, then we're really minimizing our own faith, aren't we? We're living a small faith. Well, this week we see some striking takeaways, I think. One is, God can call us at any time. It's God's timing. Why did he wait 40 years to get Moses to go back into Egypt? I don't know. But God's time is the right time. It's always the right time. And then we see that God's time's not always our time. Because Moses obviously wasn't ready and wasn't feeling confident or strong or like I can go in and free my people. Because the concept I'm sure Moses was fine with. Free the Israelites? Yeah. It's my people. I actually committed murder over one of them because they're my people. He probably was just hoping somebody else would do the work. And aren't we like that?
He also saw the Egyptians' power.
They were the most powerful country, empire in the world. And he's just one dude. Just a sheep herder going back to a place that he knew far too well. I think it would almost been better if he had never been there because he knew what he would be walking into. So sometimes we know, what we know is enough to scare us off. What we don't know is what God knows. Second thing I think this verse of Scriptures tell us is God knows us better than we know ourselves. God could have said, you know what, I'm done with you. At any point Moses says, no, I can't. No, what do I say? How am I going to say it? I don't know, they're not going to listen. At some point, I would have probably after about the second or third time went, you know what, this ain't working. I'll find somebody who can do the job. Thankfully, I'm not God because it turned out great, and he knew that. But God knows us better than we know us. And that's a beautiful thing because somebody's going to know how all this turns out, right? Because when you live minute to minute, day to day, it's nice to know you're being led by somebody who already figured it out and who can lead you. Third thing is, God will help us accomplish his objectives. Because again, God did what with Moses? He equipped him. Said, you are going to be a God. You are going to say what I want you to say. Here's Aaron to do the talking for you if you can't do it. See that staff? You're going to do some pretty awesome things with it. And still, the initial Moses' response is, I just don't know if I'm up for this. They're not going to listen to me. And of course they didn't, which is why we have plagues. And finally, one of the things that I think we can take out of all this story of Moses is God has tremendous patience with us. How patient was God when Moses kept coming back again and again and again? And I have this picture of him walking towards Egypt going, are you sure? I mean, somebody else can do this. Are you sure? Because, we can find somebody on the road. We'll grab somebody when we get to Egypt. And God just constantly says, you can do this. I'll help you do it. I'll make you do it. I'll give you everything you need to have to do it. And it's a great thing because I know there's some things that have happened in my life where I know for a fact I didn't control that and I didn't make that happen. But I was there when it happened and I was there to be used for something great. So, when we refuse God's call to serve, he provides us with assistance. He helps us because he's patient with us and he cares about us. So, when we refuse God's call to serve, he provides us confidence. Feet of clay tend to get shattered. So he gives us assistance and he gives us confidence. And then he gives us insight to know his will. We may not know it right away. We may never understand it till we get to heaven. But there's a lot of push from God to be great, to further his word, to further his objectives, to further his the spreading of his word, of bringing people to know him, of making us stronger. It all works out in the end. And we all have the ability and we're given opportunities and we have the chance to do great things with God and through God. But unfortunately, he doesn't talk to us in bushes. I wish he did sometimes. I really wish he would just come up to the front door and go, Phil, I need you to do this. And I may be like Moses. He did that and Moses still said, I'd rather not. Thank you, no. But I appreciate the offer. So I would love to have sometimes, but we don't have that. What we have are words. What we have are feelings. Like Holy Spirit will sometimes tickle your brain a little bit if you're listening. And that's unfortunately falls on us. Any questions? Qualms, quibbles, quotations, queries, quandaries, qualifications, quirks? I got a bunch of them. Yes, yes, sir.
I think when the Lord first spoke to Moses, he told him to take off his sandals. You ever walk around in the desert
It's a little warm.
get on your knees and
And obviously, I know it's still a burning bush. I'm still putting off heat, I would reckon. Even though it's not burning it up, it's still a fire. So now you've taken hot sand and made it hotter. And, well, and as soon as he says, Moses, to his credit, realizes it's God pretty fast, doesn't he? And hides his face. Says, not looking. And then we find out later, Moses is the only person that gets to see God. He gets to see the back of God, but he's the only person here on earth that actually gets to see God. So it works out pretty good for Moses in the thick of things. It's just, there's a lot of distance between point A and point B. And that's the way that it works with God. It's never, drive over here, you'll be done in 15 minutes, and everything will work out great. I wish it was that way, because, I got things to do, right? Our timing's not always God's timing. Anything else? Thank y'all for everything.